Hello, everyone. My name is Navkiran Natt. I'm a 30-year-old dentist turned cinema and film researcher come student from India. And today I'm here to talk about an incredible and historical event I have been part of. And nope, it's neither about dentistry or films or media, nothing. But one thing is sure, that this issue impacts all of us. So this is the story of victory of patience and unity over oppression. And in my mother language, which is Punjabi, "ए जबर उत्ते सबर दे जित दी कहानी है." So this is about the recently concluded Indian farmers movement. A farmer is known as Annadata in my country. That means the food giver. And I believe that's not true just for India, but also for the rest of the world. A farmer is the most significant section of any society, and more so in India. But still, they are the most impoverished ones, especially the small farmers. 150 million. This is the total number of farmers in India right now. Still, the farming sector is the biggest and the most significant job provider in my country, which give employment to nearly 60% of the workforce and accounts for 18% of India's total GDP. And do you know what is the average income of an agrarian household in India? It is $1.35 per day. What one can get in that amount? And also, even the minimum wage in the US is 43 times higher than this. 400,000 farmers have committed suicide in the last 25 years in my country. So that's the situation of agrarian sector in general in India. But in year 2020, during the first wave of COVID lockdown in India, the Indian government passed 3 new farm laws claiming it will make agriculture better. But the situation was totally opposite. The farmers, who are primary stakeholders in this case, they believed that these 3 laws would left them at the mercy of the big corporate houses, and it would become the last nail in the coffin of the already dying farming sector. That's why they started protesting. They protested in their home states for a few months, but when nothing concrete happened, when nobody listened to them, they started marching towards Delhi, which is the national capital of India. And on 26th of November 2020, the biggest ever strike happened in the recorded history of my country, post-independence. And the farmers, and total 250 million people participated in that strike. Let that sink in, because that's almost 3/4 of total population of the US. And when the farmers were marching towards Delhi, they were met with brute force. They were stopped, the highways were dug up by the state, but they patiently faced all that, patiently and united. They waited for hours, and they finally reached at the borders of the national capital and set up 4 different protest sites at the borders of Delhi. The movement was historic. The aesthetic of this movement was amazing. The series of these dramatic events in any protest, as well as the number of protesters who participated, is without precedent in India. So now you must be thinking, why am I telling you all this? Because I'm not a farmer, I'm a student. But I was brought up in a farming family in Punjab. I have lived there at the protest site for 1 long year on the road with the struggling farmers. So I've experienced this movement quite closely. And let me tell you, it was incredible. I have experienced the social fault lines in my society, such as caste, class, gender, region, religion, dividing people quite early in my life. Maybe when many of us were exploring the playgrounds. So that was the time when I experienced how these different identities of people also became a reason they were facing atrocities. And reading word literature also exposed me to the hope and despair in the society. So when I first visited the farmers' protest site, I realized that this movement became an event which seems to dissolve all those divisions. People across caste, class, gender, region, religion, they came together, like you can see here. Muslim women, Sikh women, women from Punjab, women from Haryana, which are different states, they all came together to resist these farm laws. And there's another beautiful picture here where Muslim community is praying and at the same time Sikhs are praying. And this was really beautiful, inspiring, heartwarming, that too in these divisive times. So from batons, water cannons, arrests to slurs of anti-nationals and separatists, the struggling farmers faced everything. Why? Why they were forced to face all these things? Just because of their religious identity? Or just because many of them wear turban? Or because they were fighting for their just rights? Or because they were asking for the fair return of their labor and food on every citizen's plate? So these are the important questions which one should raise. And also these protest sites, there were people living in very difficult situations. There were, the hygiene was terrible. People from comparatively privileged background were sitting there, living near the open gutters where there were mosquitoes and other insects. People forced to live and sleep near the trucks and other traffic on the road. But for some reason, there was still a joy, because they knew they were together and they knew they're gonna win. So this kind of joy was still there even when they were living in those terrible situations. They were facing extreme winter conditions and everything, but they were still smiling. And like many others, I also found how I could contribute to this movement, because as I told, I was part of this movement from the very beginning. So we, a small group of young individuals, students, young writers and artists, we came together and started a newsletter named Trolley Times. So here it's written in Punjabi, which is my mother tongue. So it was a bilingual newsletter. So the thing is, the movement in the time we are living in has made us realize that the mere criticism of the propaganda media will not suffice. We have to counter it with the good journalism, which we try to did through the Trolley Times. And when I was covering the movement for the newsletter, I came across many stories, many moments and instances which made me realize how this movement brought millions together. So it was really interesting. Like the movement, there were people who participated in the movement in best of their capacities and according to the needs of the protest. people were building up tents. They were supplying groceries and essentials, and free of cost, no charge. So there were free medical camps at the protest site. There were libraries where like people were coming and reading. There were public lectures and film screenings. So the protest sites became self-sustained autonomous townships, like a huge commune. And why I'm saying huge? Because in this picture, you can just have a very small, the smallest idea of the size of the protest. So the protest site, which you are seeing here in this photographs, is the Tikri border protest site, which was 21 kilometers long. That too, just one protest site. So similarly, we had 4 other protest sites. So in that way, it became really interesting, and it was huge. Something which one can experience, like one can imagine as impossible, but the farmers made it possible. And another thing which this movement did, they forced the protesters to think beyond the question of repealing the 3 farm laws, which was the main demand of the farmers. And that practice made the movement more inclusive and multi-layered, like men cooking and women taking the leadership roles. So the movement restructured the gender roles, although momentarily, but it might bring out long-term changes in the society or in the region I live in. Here it's important to tell you a fact that the 50% of the workforce in agriculture in India are made by women. So women are almost 50% of the workforce, but their land holding is just 2%. So they didn't get the recognition of their labor all these years. But in this movement, in this very movement, women asserted themselves as farmers, which I believed made this movement more gender equal space. And similarly, Dalits, a formerly untouchable section of the society, they had like very less or no land holdings. They also came in solidarity with the movement, and I believe they enriched the movement with their questions of like Dalit rights. So in that way, this movement became a really important space. So here I want to tell you a story of martyr Harchand Singh Khalsa. He sacrificed his life for a greater good. So Harchand Singh Khalsa was a 65-year-old Dalit laborer who never visited his home once since the movement began. And on 1st October 2021, he was hit by a truck on the protest site, and he got his spinal cord fractured. After multiple surgeries and a month-long hospitalization, he still denied to go back, saying he will stay there until his colleagues sat on the protest sites. And he stayed on the protest site in that bedridden situation and unfortunately passed away a few days later. But the thing is, he wasn't the only one who sacrificed his life. He was one among the 733 martyrs of this movement. Also, Akbari, a Muslim woman, she walked for 11 days, covering 250 kilometers from Bathinda, which is a district in Mansa, Punjab state, to Tikri border protest site to show her solidarity with the movement. So she believed that this movement belonged to her also. She who doesn't own any land currently, but definitely she dreams of owning the land one day. So it wasn't the movement of the landowners only. She said one thing. Akbari told, when I was interviewing her for the Trolley Times, she told me one thing. She said, if the corporates, if the big corporate houses will take over this land, then her dream of owning the same land will also be crushed. So that was the association of millions of people with this very movement. So journalists, students, workers, writers, doctors, commoners, anyone who stood with this movement faced one or the other kind of violence. But the good thing is they stood firmly because this movement was a ray of hope, not just for the farmers, but for everyone who believes in constitution, who believes in democratic, secular, and progressive India. And interestingly, the movement also didn't disappoint anyone. On 11th December 2021, the government was forced to take back his decision. The government decided to take back these 3 farm laws. And that was the victory for the farmers. After protesting for 16 long months, millions of people, hundreds of martyrs, and like countless stories of hope and despair, the farmers won. The unity and patience won. Now you must be thinking why it is important to you. Because the farmers' movement tells us how to make something impossible possible. It tells us the importance of unity. It tells us the importance of patience. Like struggles like Black Lives Matter or right to unionize in the corporate sector or universal health rights in the US. All these movements appeal and belong to millions of people, like the farmers' movement did. The farmers' movement is a victory of people's movement with a message. United we win, divided we fall. And in these tiring times, during the pandemic, if anything the pandemic has taught us, it is this: no one is safe until each of us is safe. So let's unite and save each other, all of us, with unity and patience. Thank you.